The sound of a city is usually defined by the roar of engines and the hum of electricity, but if you listen closely to the cracks in the pavement, you might hear the soft, rhythmic scratching of a billion tiny legs preparing to reclaim the concrete jungle. It starts as a minor inconvenience, a flickering street lamp or a sudden internet outage in a single neighborhood. Most people look at their phones, complain about the service provider, and move on with their lives, unaware that beneath their feet, the very foundations of their world are being systematically dismantled. This is not a story of a sudden explosion or a grand invasion from the sky, it is a story of a silent, overwhelming tide that thrives on our indifference and our reliance on a fragile infrastructure. The danger is not that they are coming, but that they have always been here, waiting for the moment our complexity becomes our greatest weakness. Imagine a single super colony, a biological machine consisting of 1 billion individuals, all moving with a singular, terrifying purpose. While we argue over politics and social trends, this collective intelligence is mapping our vents, our sewage lines, and our electrical grids. In nature, ants are the ultimate architects, but when their environment becomes a metropolis of glass and steel, their architecture becomes our destruction. They do not need to bite us to defeat us. They only need to exist in the places we have forgotten, turning our own complexity against us. We have built our lives on the assumption of stability, but that stability is being eaten away from the inside out, one circuit at a time. The first real sign of the crisis often goes unnoticed because it looks like a series of unrelated accidents. A transformer blows in the suburbs, leaving 3 blocks in the dark. A water main bursts in the downtown district, flooding a subway station. In each case, repair crews find the same strange residue, thousands of charred insect husks clogging the circuits and the valves. Certain species are naturally attracted to electromagnetic fields, drawn to the warmth and the pulsing energy of the wires that power our lives. When one ant is electrocuted, it releases a pheromone, a chemical distress signal that summons thousands more. They rush into the fray, piling their bodies onto the source of the heat until the connection shorts out and the lights go dark. It is a suicidal reinforcement loop that no software can predict and no fuse can withstand. As the outages spread, the city's rhythm begins to stutter. We are a society built on the assumption that the lights will always turn on and the water will always flow. When those certainties vanish, the thin veneer of urban civility begins to crack. At the local hospital, backup generators groan under the sudden pressure, while in the high-rise apartments, the elevators grind to a halt between floors. People start to notice the sheer volume of the intruders. They aren't just in the gardens anymore, they are emerging from the electrical outlets, streaming out of the vents, and forming living bridges across the hallways. The sheer weight of a billion ants is not just a number, it is a physical force that can weigh hundreds of pounds when clustered together, enough to collapse a ceiling or block a ventilation shaft. Consider the visual spectacle of the collapse. At Times Square, the center of the world's attention, the transformation is horrific. The massive LED screens, usually vibrant with advertisements and news, begin to flicker with a strange, organic static. It isn't a digital glitch, it is the black tide. Millions of ants crawl behind the glass, drawn to the immense heat of the processors. Their bodies eventually coat the internal components so thickly that the screens turn into dark, pulsing masses of shadow. The bright lights of the city are replaced by a shifting, undulating darkness that mimics the very messages they once displayed. The advertisements for luxury goods are buried under a carpet of chitin and mandibles, a silent statement from a power that cares nothing for commerce. There is a psychological weight to this kind of conflict that no military manual can prepare us for. How do you fight an enemy that is everywhere and nowhere at once? You can kill 1,000 with a spray, but there are 999 million more behind them. They do not feel fear, they do not tire, and they do not negotiate. They operate on a level of efficiency that makes human logistics look like chaos. While we scramble to coordinate emergency services, the colony has already redirected its flow to the next vulnerable point in the grid. It is a war of attrition where we are the ones running out of resources. Every step we take to defend ourselves seems to provide them with a new opportunity to infiltrate. The auditory horror of the invasion is perhaps the most unsettling. The usual city sounds are replaced by a new kind of white noise. It is the sound of a billion tiny legs scuttling across glass, the dry rasp of bodies rubbing against the inside of drywall, and the rhythmic clicking of mandibles. It creates a constant, low-frequency hum that vibrates in the teeth and makes the skin crawl. In the dead of night, when the power is gone and the machines have finally fallen silent, this biological static is all that remains. It is the sound of a world being repurposed, a mechanical heartbeat replaced by a swarm's collective breathing. By the second day, the city's communication networks begin to fail. The delicate fiber optic cables that carry our data are encased in plastic that, to certain species, feels like a barrier to be cleared or a substrate to be utilized. As the internet flickers out, the silence becomes deafening. People spill out into the streets, looking for information, but they find only more confusion. The grocery stores are the next to fall. Not because the ants eat all the food, but because their presence makes the environment uninhabitable. They contaminate water supplies and infiltrate refrigeration units, causing thousands of tons of perishables to rot in a matter of hours. The logistics of feeding a city of millions depend on a precision that the invasion has utterly shattered. Our modern smart homes quickly become our prisons. We have spent a decade connecting every lock, every camera, and every thermostat to a central hub. When the ants infiltrate these microprocessors, the logic of the house breaks down. Doors that require an electronic signal to unlock remain frozen. Security cameras show only a wall of moving black legs before going dark. In some high-tech complexes, families find themselves trapped in their own apartments because the electronic fire safety locks have shorted out. The very technology intended to keep us safe and comfortable is converted into a series of traps. The house doesn't just fail, it turns against its inhabitants, governed now by the erratic movements of a swarm. The conflict isn't just between humans and insects, it's between our technology and the raw, relentless power of biology. We have built our cities to keep nature out, but in doing so, we have created a perfect, climate-controlled labyrinth for an adaptable predator. Every heated pipe is a highway, every wall cavity is a nursery. We are living inside their nest, and we are only just beginning to realize it. The tension in the air is palpable, a mixture of ozone from shorted wires and the bitter, formic acid scent of a colony in high gear. It is a smell that triggers a primal alarm in the human brain, a warning that we are no longer the apex of this particular ecosystem. In the high-rises, a new and terrifying sight emerges: ant bridges. To cross the vast gaps between skyscrapers where the elevators have died, the ants perform a feat of biological engineering. Thousands of individuals lock their legs together, creating living cables that sway in the wind. These bridges span the alleyways and the streets below, allowing the colony to bypass our barricades. They move with the grace of a single organism, a dark, pulsing rope of life hanging hundreds of feet above the pavement. It is a reminder that our vertical achievements are no obstacle to a species that has mastered the art of collective movement over millions of years. Emergency meetings are held in dimly lit basements, where officials realize the traditional methods of pest control are useless on this scale. Poisoning the city would mean poisoning the people. Fire is too dangerous in a landscape of gas lines and crowded structures. The suggested solutions are desperate and unproven. Some advocate for a massive disruption of pheromone trails using synthetic chemicals, while others suggest flooding the tunnels with nitrogen. But each plan carries the risk of unforeseen consequences. If you kill the ants, what happens to the billions of rotting carcasses left inside the walls? The secondary health crisis could be worse than the primary one. We are trapped in a stalemate with a mindless force that doesn't even know it's at war. As night falls on the third day, the city looks like a ghost of itself. Without streetlights, the shadows seem to move. Every rustle in the trash, every scratch against the window pane, feels like a threat. The conflict has moved from the infrastructure into the homes. People are barricading their doors, not against burglars, but against a tide that can fit through the gap under a threshold or the space around a pipe. The psychological toll is devastating. Sleep becomes impossible when you know that the walls around you are pulsing with life. The dark thriller of the modern age isn't about a monster under the bed, it's about a billion tiny monsters inside the bed, the walls, and the very air we breathe. There is a strange irony in the way we view our dominance over the planet. We measure our success by the height of our buildings and the speed of our processors, yet all of it can be brought to a standstill by a creature that has remained virtually unchanged for millions of years. The ants are not malicious, they do not hate us. They are simply following an ancient script of expansion and survival. They see our city not as a monument to human achievement, but as a vast, untapped resource. Our wires are their heat sources, our pantries are their spoils, and our bodies are merely obstacles to be bypassed or recycled. They are the ultimate pragmatists in an age of human vanity. In the height of the crisis, the city's social fabric begins to unravel. Rumors fly in the absence of reliable news. Some claim the invasion is a freak biological mutation, while others believe it's a symptom of a collapsing local ecosystem that has driven the colonies inward. The truth is likely more mundane and more terrifying. We simply reached a tipping point where urban growth and insect adaptation collided. The conflict is the result of a million small choices, poor waste management, crumbling infrastructure, and a total lack of biological foresight. We built a paradise for our replacements without even realizing it. We paved the world and were surprised when the things that lived beneath the pavement decided to move upstairs. The climax of the struggle isn't a final battle, but a realization. As the last of the major power stations fails, plunging the entire region into darkness, the city falls silent. In that silence, the human residents realize that they cannot win by force. To survive, they must retreat. The evacuation is a slow, somber exodus. Cars clog the highways, their headlights cutting through the dark, while the people inside look back at the skyline they once thought was invincible. The buildings still stand, but they are no longer ours. They are monuments to a collective that values the whole over the individual, a mirror held up to our own fractured society. The city is a hive now, and we are the displaced. Data centers, the cathedrals of the modern age, suffer a unique fate. These sprawling facilities, filled with rows of humming servers, are the brains of our global civilization. To the ants, they are something else, the perfect incubator. The heat generated by the high-performance chips is ideal for nurturing larvae. Within days of the first breach, the Silicon Valleys of the city are transformed into vast nurseries. The data that powers our economy is literally smothered by the next generation of the swarm. The cloud isn't taken down by a hacker, it is grounded by the physical presence of a biological force that finds our digital world to be a very comfortable place to raise a family. Years later, those who remember the Great Influx talk about it as a turning point in how we design our world. We learned that complexity is a vulnerability. We learned that we cannot ignore the small things, for they are the foundation of everything large. The city was eventually reclaimed, but it was never the same. The walls were rebuilt with different materials, the grids were redesigned with multiple redundancies, and the insect-proof labels became the most important part of any building code. But the fear remains. Every time a light flickers or a phone loses its signal, people look at the ground. Every time a smart lock delays for a second too long, the heart skips a beat. The dark truth of the billion ant invasion is that it could happen again. Not because of a plot or a grand design, but because biology is persistent. Nature does not recognize our borders or our property rights. It only recognizes opportunity. We live in a delicate balance with a world we barely understand, and our survival depends on our ability to respect the forces that operate beneath our notice. The scratching in the walls is a reminder that we are guests in a world that belonged to the swarm long before we learned to walk upright. We have reclaimed the streets, but we have not conquered the threat. We have only reached a temporary truce with a neighbor that has infinite patience. As the sun rises over the reclaimed city, the glass towers reflect the light just as they always did. But if you walk through the parks or sit on a concrete bench, you might notice a single ant crawling across your shoe. It is a scout, an explorer, a messenger. It is the first of many. And as you watch it move with that frantic, purposeful energy, you have to wonder, is it just looking for food, or is it measuring the distance to the nearest transformer? The conflict is never truly over, it is only in a state of temporary equilibrium. The city hums with life once more, but it is a hum that carries a warning. The risk of collapse is always present, hidden in the mundane details of our daily lives. We are surrounded by systems so complex that no single person understands them all, and that complexity is exactly what makes us vulnerable to the simplest of organisms. A billion ants do not need a leader to bring down a civilization, they only need to be themselves. They are the ultimate dark thriller, a silent antagonist that waits for us to blink, for us to forget that we are not the only ones who know how to build a world. They are the debt that our modern lifestyle has accrued, and eventually, the debt collector always comes knocking. We move forward with a new sense of caution, a realization that our mastery over the earth is a fragile illusion. We monitor the soil, we seal the conduits, and we listen. We listen for that rhythmic scratching, that subtle shift in the environment that signals the return of the tide. Because we know now that the greatest threats aren't the ones we see coming from the horizon. They are the ones that have been here all along, waiting in the cracks, growing in the shadows, and counting their numbers until they reach that magic, terrifying billion. We are no longer the undisputed masters of the concrete jungle, we are just the most recent tenants. The city breathes, a living organism made of steel and bone, but it is a breath held in anticipation. We have seen what happens when the small things unite, and we know that we are outnumbered. The next time the lights flicker, it might just be a surge in the grid, or it might be the start of the next reclamation. The dark thriller of the city is a story without a final chapter, a narrative of survival that plays out every day in the hidden spaces between the concrete. And in that story, we are not the heroes, we are simply the current tenants, hoping that the landlords don't decide to move back in.
Hey,
in the end, the most
Glad
chilling
you made it.
realization is the one that hits you when you return to your own home. Everything looks normal. The walls are freshly painted, the smart hub glows a reassuring blue, and the air conditioning hums softly. But as you place your hand against the drywall, you feel it, a faint, rhythmic vibration. It's not the plumbing, and it's not the wind. It's a heartbeat that doesn't belong to you. The city wasn't won back, it was merely leased. The insect-proof seals are just a suggestion to a force that has all the time in the world. As you pull your hand away, you realize the scratching hasn't stopped. It has only moved deeper, waiting for the next cycle of energy to peak, waiting for us to feel safe enough to stop listening. The silence isn't peace, it's a countdown.